If you're wondering what other wheel arrangements that I want to do next, I hope on doing either the 262 Prairie types or the 280 consolidations. And I don't think either of those will be any easier, if at all. And until next time, sparkle, sparkle, sparkle. Now, what does the consolidation list look like? Oh, what about the prairies? Oh, come on. The 280 type, also called consolidations or connies for the most part.
Connie?
I can't decide which one of you I'm going to kiss first.
Was a locomotive type that became a principal hauler on many railroads, big and small, beginning in the late 19th century. The first 280 was built for the Lehigh Valley and gained the name Consolidation from the consolidation of the Beaver Meadow, Penhaven, and Whitehaven Railroad and the Lehigh and Mahanoy Railroads into the Lehigh Valley. The name would stick, but at first many railroads did not order consolidations, as many railroads at the time favored the 440 proud to be an American type locomotive over the consolidations. But by the 1870s, the consolidation type would be heavily ordered by the Pennsylvania Railroad, and many others would soon follow. These investments in connies paid off for many railroads at the time, as they pulled sometimes even twice as much as their 440 predecessors. However, later on, the connies would be bumped off to lower-level assignments by Mikados, Mountains, Northerns, and even big articulateds as trains became heavier and longer. But that does not mean that they were completely forgotten about, as many connies would later be preserved. And although not every connie made it into preservation, they're still very significant, and they are what I'll be talking about in this video. In this video, I'll be talking about consolidations from every North American railroad, as usual, alphabetical order, and will include connies that a railroad got from another railroad. Subsidiaries will only be included if their connies were separate from their owners, so subsidiary railroads like the Rio Grande Southern won't be mentioned, as the RGS was a Denver and Rio Grande Western subsidiary, not a separate road. Same goes for the Oregon Railroad and Navigation and the El Paso and Southwestern. With that out of the way, here's every North American 280 type described in 15 words or less. Some of the few new steam locomotives bought by the railroad. Vauclane compounds for a railroad serving South Central Ontario, and some from the MNSTL too. Diamond stack connies for a railroad that logged, then mined. Now with the ability to run on 60 to 75 pound rail. Serving a branch line east of Alamogordo and getting sent to the EP&SW later on. Later becoming the Alexander and Eastern, then sold off. A mandated coal variant with a cylindrical tender, later sold off to many other railroads until being cut up in 1929. Reliable little freight engines for Michigan. Now with several connies surviving, including one connie from the New York Central, serving the ACL well, with one surviving but in deplorable condition, getting sold off to other railroads later on. Diamond stack connies that were originally for the Rio Grande. A.J. Cromwell survives, camelback connies, and standard connies forgotten about. The loyal iron horses of the state of Maine with some Bostonian friends. Later sold to the Woodward Iron and survives today in Calera, Alabama. Wait a minute, are you telling me that Iowa had a narrow gauge 280? Later coming under ownership of the Pennsylvania Northwestern and the PRR. mandated logging variants with one sold to the Valley Railroad and survives. Later sold to the Alabama Central and survives, but is in bad shape. A mandated logging variant for Monroe County, Alabama. Connie's working for a railroad that worked with the Cotton Belt. The backbone of New England Rail, sold to other lines, all reduced to scrap. Later sent to the Pittsburgh, Shawmut, and Northern Railroad. The few steam locomotives that were in service up to the 1960s. Also, one survives. Early Connies for a line battling the Erie and dead by World War I. Connies of the biggest little railroad in the world displaced by electrics and adopted by GN. Oh my god, it's so small! It deserves a head pat. Can I pat it, please? Do you want a regular or camelback locomotive with your meal, sir? Mandated coal variants for Western Pennsylvania and all dead by 1944. More mandated coal variants serving a relatively small West Virginian coal railroad. Connies of many Canadian railways with several now in preservation. Reliable mainline and local freight engines with one in excursion service. And one underwater. I didn't expect a kind of preserved Canadian steam locomotives inquisition. Later sold to the Internacional Mexicano, serving the Carolinas through a southern subsidiary and retired before the 1950s. Reliable coal haulers of the Appalachian Mountains and the actual Clinchfield 311. And now we're back to the mandated logging variants. The mandated plantation variant exclusive to Cuba with some still around today. Later sold to all sorts of different railroads. A mandated sugar variant for the island of Puerto Rico. Now coming as camelback locomotives. Now serving for a CN subsidiary in Vermont. One of the main haulers for the CFG with one still around today. This existed. Probably. Later converted into a 282 but kept its number. Now with one surviving at Covington, West Virginia. Hello again, Chicago squad. Really useful little Connies for the C&A and dead by the 50s. Some original, some rebuilt with superheating, some ex-Frisco, all forgotten about. Reliable engines for the C&IM with one getting sold and converted to a Mikado. Zulus for the Northwestern and the Omaha Road that are small and quite unknown.
I'm Great Western and don't we know it's railroad?
Connies for a railroad under the NYC for Chicago's Dearborn Station, serving the plains in the Front Range with some from its Colorado subsidiaries surviving. Somewhat small but still reliable locomotives for the Hoosier Line. Also,
oh, up and down the Mona, everything is fine, 'cause that rootin' tootin' Mona, she's a Hoosier Line. Oh, up and down the Mona, everything is fine, 'cause that rootin' tootin' Mona, she's a Hoosier Line.
The Milwaukee Road
locomotives serving the Midwest and the Northwest. Do you want a high or a centered headlight and a regular or part wheelback tender? Mexican Connies for the mountain grades of the El Chepe. Connie locomotives for Mexico that later served under NDM. Narrow gauge Connies serving some of the highest states in Mexico with several still standing. Of the typical generic consolidation design for the CNW. Rio Grande consolidation copies serving the first standard gauge railroad in the Colorado Rockies. Standard gauge consolidation serving the Cripple Creek mining district but going on the shorter route. More generic design consolidations for the Pacific Northwest. Later sold to the Colitz, Chehalis, and Cascade Railway and survives but in terrible shape. Connies serving a South Carolinian short line well and dead by 1951. served under various railroads, and doesn't survive. The big boys of the Copper Range, with one surviving at the MCRM. One of the biggest steam locomotives for the Cornwall and lasted until 1950. A mandated mining variant for Arizona and New Mexico. More mandated coal variants for Nova Scotia. More coal variants for Southern Railway subsidiary. This existed. Probably. Serving one of the hottest places on Earth with one still standing. Seems alright to me. Okay, it's a Camelback. Is that the polar... Wait, stop. Do you want a standard locomotive or a Camelback locomotive with your fries, sir? Built for the top of the world, died on the Rio Grande. The biggest haulers on the narrow gauge until the Mikados arrived. Several rebuilt into narrow gauge Mikados, and the only survivor of standard gauge steam, 683. Small Connies running west of Denver, and now the oldest surviving steam locomotives in Colorado. The only Camelback locomotives in Mexico. Later sold to the Caslo and Slocan Railway, serving a railroad that went to Mackinac, but not Detroit. Hauled the freight of the DT&I well, and outclassed by Mikados and Berkshires. Berkshire? I don't know. A mandated logging variant, this time for Florida. Later became a part of the N&W. Now with several surviving, including a 1218 imposter and one from the D&E, which is an icon for the North Shore Scenic Railroad with a sister on the Sierra Railroad, serving a railroad that never actually made it to the Atlantic Ocean, now forever abandoned in the woods of Maine. For eastern British Columbia, not much else to say. Narrow gauge and later standard gauge Connies for the pretty little Tweetsy, but none survive. Later rebuilt into 080s and dead by the end of the 40s. Later sold to other railroads and survives at a Christian youth camp at Lake Gaston. Guess the 100 had the good grace of God on its side if it made it into preservation like that. Would you like a regular tender or a Vanderbilt tender for your meal, sir? Connies for Copper Country in Wisconsin and northern Michigan. Narrow gauge Connies of central Nevada outstarred by the Eureka. Mandated mining variants of the Mexican narrow gauge for Chihuahua. Once again, mandated logging variants for Mississippi. More mandated logging variants for Arizona and sold off to other railroads later on. The few locomotives that made it into the 60s, with one still standing. This apparently existed. Served the Grand Trunk well in all sorts of work, but weren't lucky enough to escape the torch. Serving a railroad going between Great Falls, Montana and Lethbridge, Alberta. Also, as a side note, I put a photo unknown on top of here because the only photo I was able to find of a Great Falls in Canada 280 was protected, and I wasn't in the mood to worry about the author, copyright striking me. So, sorry about that. Rugged, powerful, and green consolidations for the Great Northern Railway, with two surviving. Serving the plains of northeastern Colorado and now survives on the Black River in western. Small Connies that could ride on 70-pound rail and with 49 still around. A mandated logging variant for Arizona that now survives in Flagstaff. Later became a part of the Dismal Swamp Railway. A mandated steel variant for New Miami, Ohio. Standardized variants for the Harriman lines with one still around but needs restoration. With a smaller gauge than most other railroads and includes some Camelbacks too. Narrow gauge Connies for a railroad in central Mexico. Connies for a railroad in central North Carolina. Later completely disposed of before the railroad was bought by the C&O. a mandated coal variant that became an excursion star and set to return on the Everett Railroad, with one that became an excursion star and has since settled in Scranton. More mandated coal variants for Virginia's western mountains. More Connies for Nova Scotia coal country, serving a small narrow gauge railroad that doesn't go past 30 miles. Later sold to the AL&L and the Sumter Lumber Company. This one existed. Probably. Coming with the option of either regular tenders or Vanderbilt tenders. Connies for a railroad with ambitious goals. That didn't get too far. Later sold to the BC&G and survives as number 14. Later sold off to various other railroads. A mandated logging variant for western Pennsylvania this time around. More narrow gauge Connies for Michigan's Upper Peninsula, serving a railroad that rapidly expanded and rapidly contracted, with several being sold and later becoming icons for many heritage railroads across America. Oh yeah, and again, did I ever mention mandated logging variant? Now a staple and an icon of the New Hope and Ivy Land Railroad, with big regular locomotives and camelbacks included in the combo, all reduced to scrap by the end of World War I. Would you like your locomotive to be a regular or a camelback locomotive, sir? Some of the first consolidations ever built for a railroad that later came under the CNJ, and once again, a mandated coal variant. The first consolidations built, and including several camelback locomotives later on. Western Pennsylvanian later sold off to the Chicago and Western Indiana Railroad. Reliable freight engine Connies for the Pennsy subsidiary, the Long Island Railroad.
Who summoned me?
More mandated mining variants for Virginia, serving a railroad that never made it to West Virginia, now a staple of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. Later sold off and survives at the Illinois Railway Museum. Some of the earliest Connies built, and outshined by newer and bigger Connies, as well as other locomotives. And with me reaching to Louisville and Nashville, part 1 is officially done. This video is once again inspired by Calian Productions' 10 words or less videos, as well as other 10 words or less videos by other YouTubers. I decided to split this video into two based on some suggestions by some people, and I wanted to get something done before spring break came, but I will start work on part 2 soon, and hopefully it'll be out by April at the earliest. Though, be sure to be patient, and the patience will reward you. Thanks for watching this part, and until next time, sparkle, sparkle, sparkle. Oh my god, the sparkle, sparkle, sparkle parts from Nostalgia Critics' Thomas and the Magic Railroad reviews are getting into my head. Ah!
Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle!
Fuck yeah, sparkle, sparkle, sparkle.
Woo! Yeah! You're right, yeah!